Stephen Harrod Buhner is an amazing herbalist and eco-philosopher, I would call him, who died, I think it was last year. It was fairly recent, which is a great loss to the herbal community. And his work, actually, I started teaching like this before I read his work, but his work explained it in this beautiful way. And he has this concept of heart perception, that the heart is a sensory organ. It's not just a pump. It's actually an organ that allows us to communicate and sense our environment. I guess what we would call like the sixth sense. So if our sense of smell is located in our nose and our sight is located in our eyes, then our intuition or our gut feeling is actually located in the heart. And through the heart, we're able to receive very complex pattern recognition information due to essentially our heart's ability to sync up our frequency with other beings. And you see that all the time with like anyone who's a mother and has a newborn baby, or who's been around a mother and newborn baby. That's what co-regulation is, right? Like your own heartbeat, the mother's heartbeat actually almost controls the heartbeat of the infant and helps them to regulate their circulation, their blood pressure, their nervous system by that kind of heart syncing. And so Stephen's kind of pitch is that you can actually train yourself to do that. I call it embodied listening. So you're listening with your body and your being and your heart in order to look quite deeply into plants and learn about them as healing beings and as spirit beings, right?
And then I always go into, I don't know whether I do it as a justification or whether I actually need to understand the physical mechanisms and measurable mechanisms, whether it is EEG measurements or ECG measurements, to prove that there's something going on in terms of the way that peripheral information comes through and you can measure it going to the heart, from the heart. Can you explain how you approach, or to the best of what you see as relevant when you're teaching your students, of explaining how that information or frequency is read, where it comes from, how that then works with the mind or the brain?
So I think the thing there is that science isn't at a place now where we're able to measure that yet. So I think any attempting to really try to understand that will be theories at best. And so I actually I don't think that we're saying that heart perception should override or is more important than any other way of knowing. But I've developed this model that I share with my students called the 3 ways of knowing. And basically, like, what I'm pushing us towards, it's like more and more and more data and information is not going to get us into insight and wisdom, right? We have this mistake we make in our culture when it comes to anything, that more information, eventually, if you just put more and more information in, that will magically transform into insight into a problem. But insight requires a lot more than just data. And so we have these 3 circles, and which are the 3 ways of knowing. And the place that those circles overlap is where we have wisdom and true insight into something. So I want all herbalists and herbal people in Australia to be moving towards a place of wisdom with plants rather than just information about plants. And that means we have to integrate the intellectual knowing, which is really important, study and data and what science can tell us about the mechanism of how things work and what receptors different chemicals work on. That's all important, but it has to be put on a level playing field and like balanced against what we can learn through heart perception, the intuitive or the imaginal realm, and also what we know through our embodied experience. Like, the basis of a clinical trial is actually an embodied practice. So it's like we gave people this herb and then we said, how do you feel? Right? It's really simple. And herbalists have been doing that forever. It's how most of the knowledge that we have about plants in the recent history has been like, yeah, well, my mentor told me that using a herb in this particular way in his clinic for the last 30 years had this particular outcome. That's accumulated embodied information that's really important. So when we bring this embodied practical wisdom, what does it feel like when you take it? What happens when you take it? When we bring the kind of intellect in, which is like, what do we know about this plant? How does it work? What's its chemistry? And we bring this what do I feel when I sit with this plant? What can I learn through heart perception, meditation, dreams, and visions? When we can bring those 3 aspects together, then we can move to herbal wisdom.